Welcome, everyone. This is the April edition of the NYNHP's monthly iMapInvasives webinar series. My name is Mitchell O'Neill. I work with the New York Natural Heritage Program, and today I'll be talking about the iMapInvasives Certified Trainers Network. And please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. So what I'll talk about today, I'll start with a brief intro, since I think we have a pretty good-sized group today, not too big, I think we'll be able to do a quick go-around for anyone who's interested in introducing themselves, basically just saying who you are and why you're thinking about the iMapInvasive Certified Trainers Network. Then I'll talk about joining the network, how to do that, some details about how to actually conduct an iMap training. And part of that will be, usually I have someone new to the Certified Trainers Network give their first training as a part of this webinar, so that everyone gets to see an example of an iMap training and that person fills out their training checkboxes. But that didn't pan out for today's webinar. So as a backup, I do have a quick recording from our last webinar where one of our certified trainers who is new at that point, but now has done many certified trainings, he gave his first online iMap mobile app training. So you'll see that. Then we'll talk a little bit about 2022 goals and then wrap up in discussion. And one of the things I am going to bring up in the discussion, I see some familiar names here from people who have conducted trainings before. So for those of you who have conducted iMap trainings, if you can think of like one, maybe two top tips that you have based on your experience, that would be really, really valuable for everyone to hear. So if you're willing, start thinking about that. So you can share that at the end if you're interested. So I'll start with a brief introduction. I work for the New York Natural Heritage Program. Mostly the New York Natural Heritage Program is known for rare species and biodiversity work. You can learn more about our organization at nynhp.org. In addition to the rare species stuff, we also have an invasive species database program because invasive species are such a threat to biodiversity and native species. And so I work in that program, and our main project here is iMapInvasives. So iMapInvasives is the centralized invasive species database used to support PRISM, state agencies, and other partners working on invasive species issues. So you can view distributions, generate reports. We have a lot of people who set up early detection email alerts so they can get an email when a new species in their area has been reported. And you can track management and control efforts and more. And I just mentioned PRISMs. So that's an acronym, PRISMS, PRISM. It stands for Partnerships for Regional Invasive Species Management. The New York State is divided into 8 of these regions. And each of these regions has an organization that coordinates a huge variety of projects in that region. So they do a lot of monitoring efforts, management efforts, they coordinate outreach in their regions, they partner with local entities within their region to monitor and manage invasive species. A lot of great work goes on across the state through these PRISMs. So if you are not familiar with the PRISM that you're located in, I encourage you to look them up. And so where does the data in iMapInvasives come from? So in the first several years of our existence, the big data source was existing data sets from partner organizations. But now to keep the database up to date, it's really important, and the largest contributors are data entered in real time by community scientists and professionals. So whole lots of organizations and volunteers all across the state contributing to iMap and keeping our data set up to date. And many of these organizations are also the people who use the data to inform their management decisions. And so that kind of leads me into why do we need IMAP invasives trainings? So we need eyes on the ground across the state reporting to a centralized database. So that gets the data all into one place where it's accessible by the people who need that data. So for example, the PRISM network. And for New York, this centralized database is iMapInvasives. And so because of that need, we have the iMapInvasives mobile app. It's, well, I should say we have several options for reporting to iMapInvasives, but one of them is the iMapInvasives mobile app. It offers quick reporting of presence and not detected data for single species. You don't need to be connected to the internet, which means it's good for observations while volunteers are out on the trail, for example. So we have this app set up so that people from across the state, whoever they are, anyone can report to iMapInvasives, so that data can be used by PRISMs and other partners. And so for that really to work, another thing we need is we need people to know about it. So we need professionals and volunteers across the state to be aware of iMapInvasives and also to know how to report to iMapInvasives, particularly using the mobile app. And so that's where the iMap Certified Trainers Network came from. It's a train the trainer program, and the goal is to connect trainers, so people who know how to use iMap and want to share it with their communities, connect those people with people and communities across the state that need to be trained in iMapInvasives. It was established in 2017 by Brittany Rogers, who is a ESF graduate student who was working with the New York Natural Heritage Program. And she has since gone to the SLILO PRISM and is their aquatic coordinator. And since then, we have taken over the iMap Certified Trainers Network. And since 2017, there have been hundreds of trainings and thousands of people all across the state have been trained. So we're very grateful for this network. It's much more than just us iMap staff would be able to tackle all on our own. So we're really grateful for having this network to help us increase our reach across the state. So that's why we like the Certified Trainers Network. But what is the benefit to certified trainers for joining this network? So it's an opportunity to contribute to ongoing invasive species monitoring and management efforts. It's a good way to engage volunteers and the public if you are someone who's trying to do that. It's a great experience for your resume. It's great public speaking experience and science communication experience. We've had a lot of early career professionals and students, college students, who have gone through the Certified Trainers program and have found value in starting their career. And it's also a good way to meet people. So people often conduct trainings together, so you get to collaborate with people and meet people on webinars and stuff. And we have resources to help you with your trainings as well. So with that, I thought it would be nice to do a quick go around. People can say their name and their region. So like if you're from a certain county or something, and what you hope to get out of being a part of the Certified Trainers Network, and what sorts of audiences you see yourself reaching. And if you don't want to speak, that's totally fine. But I'm going to go alphabetical order from first name. So if you look in the participants list, you'll see the names listed and your name will be on top, but you can sort of imagine where your name would go. And so I'll start with the A's. And so that would be Adelia Baker. And I'll just give everyone the opportunity to speak, but I can also just move on to the next person, so no pressure. But Adelia, would you like to introduce yourself?
My mic made a weird noise. My name is Adelia. I'm in the APIP region. That is the Adirondack Prism. I'm hoping to get out of this, just hoping to get more comfortable with teaching people all the different options in iMap and mostly working with volunteers and other seasonal staff.
Great, thank you, Adelia. Next on my list is Blake Newman.
Hey, yeah, this is Blake Newman. I'm also in the APIP region. I work pretty closely with the Racket Lake Preservation Foundation, a lake association there. I work primarily with Adirondack Council as a clean water advocate, also with the Adirondack Lakes Alliance. So I imagine that my role is also going to be trying to push this resource out to as many lake associations around Hamilton County and especially the western and central parts of the Adirondack Park as possible. So probably a primarily older audience, trying to train them up on using this app.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining. Next is Brittany.
Hi, Brittany Hernan with Western New York Prism. So I hope to get some, additional tips and resources. I feel like we've held some pretty successful trainings this year, especially with Hemlock Woolly Delgid, but there's always, room to grow, more to learn. And as far as audiences go, I mean, next week we're training all of our seasonal staff members on, a variety of iMap tools, and then we work with our partners, the public, so, a variety of audiences.
Cool, thank you. And then Cecilia. I don't hear anything. I don't know if that's just me. It looks like you unmuted yourself. Sometimes it happens to me where, I'm on Zoom and WebEx all the time, but sometimes every once in a while I'll log on and no one can hear me. Oh, remote desktop, that'll do it. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, Cecilia. Thank you. So next would be Emily.
Hey there, this is Emily Dickinson. I'm from Madison Square Park Conservancy in Manhattan. We have quite a few wildlife survey and plant surveys going on using iNaturalist and eBird, so both internal and external, and we thought this would be a great tool to add to the mix.
Great, awesome to have you. Next alphabetically is Frank.
Hi, Frank Williams. I'm live here in Utica, New York. I've been a part of iMapInvasives team since 2015 when I got trained, and I think I've been a trainer for them since 2017 or 2018. I do a lot of work with Slelo Prism, but being in Utica, I'm real close to the APIP and the Capitol and the the Catskills. So willing to help out anybody, and I enjoy putting on seminars.
Awesome. Thank you, Frank. We've been very lucky to have you in the network for the past few years. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you did a great project last year with the RIT that you got me involved with. That was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, awesome. Cool. And then next is Hailie Gladich.
Hi, yeah, this is Hailie from LISMA from the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area. And I'm just hoping to get some, new tips for when we do some more upcoming trainings this year. We're hoping to kind of branch out, and there's been some interest from schools using the invasive species curriculum, wanting to get some training on iMapInvasives, as well as folks like arborists. So yeah, sort of just brainstorming that ourselves at the moment.
Cool, thank you. Next is Kristen.
Hi, this is Kristen Halleck at the Cornell University Biological Field Station on Oneida Lake. I think we are in the St. Lawrence Prism. We have a summer intern program coming up and also field bio in the fall. So I thought this would be a great thing for me to learn to be able to teach the students that come here.
Cool, thank you. Then Leanne.
This is Leanne Bruch. I am part of the CRISP Prism with the Watershed Steward Program. I did learn how to use iMap, I think 2 summers ago with the stewards, and I thought it was a useful tool. So I'm hoping to kind of learn a little bit more and bring it back to other stewards. And also with all the public education and outreach we do, it's going to be useful to bring it to the people who could be helpful as citizen scientists.
Great, thank you. I'll quickly mention at NYNHP, we also manage the data collection tool that stewards use. So that's one of the other things that the Invasive Species Database Program does. WISPA is what that's called. Next on the list is Liz.
Hi, this is Liz Metzger from the Osceola River Association up in the APIP Prism. We work with a lot of volunteers and landowners who are interested in serving for invasive species. So we'd like to be able to train them and some of our seasonal workers as well.
Great, thanks. Then next is Marshall.
Hey everybody, Marshall Lefevre with Mohawk Land Conservancy. I used iMaps extensively in my past position with New York State, but also side and research. Found it to be a really awesome tool.
Great, thank you.
Pretty volunteer base here across 3 counties. I think would really.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you. Sorry for, I think I interrupted. Your audio went out for me for a second, so I thought you were done, but thank you. Great to hear. I just lost my spot. Next on the list is Melody.
Hi everyone, my name is Melody Penny. I'm a new invasive species technician with the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area. My goal in participating today is to gain an understanding of some tips and resources for navigating my way through iMapInvasives and other GIS platforms. And I feel that it'll be a useful tool in advancing my career in conservation.
Great, thanks. And next is Michelle.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Lockett. I am from Niagara River Greenway, so I'm in the Western New York Prism area. I'm fairly new to all this. I'm familiar with iMap a little bit, and I'm working with a lot of youth in our youth stewardship program, so I'm interested in trying to encourage teachers and students to use the app.
Cool, thank you. I realized I skipped over Meg. Sorry, Meg.
Sure, but you also have 2 Michelles, so I'll go in between the 2 Michelles.
Okay.
My name is Meg Wilkinson. I'm with the New York Natural Heritage Program and the Invasive Species Database Program team. And just delighted to hear the different ways of using this across the state. I know several people, and I know Mitch will mention this as well. Well, never mind. You'll cover it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And then Michelle Lockett.
Hi, I work for Q County Planning Department. I have given many trainings on iMapInvasives for a while, and I was just on today to see if there was anything new. I usually give a training during Invasive Species Awareness Week, which is coming up soon.
Great, thanks. I used to have everyone's name in order and then it suddenly shuffled. So I think next is Bob. Yeah.
Hey, Mitch. Hi, my name is Bob. I'm from the New York State DEC. with the Bureau of Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health and Coordination as the Responsive Management Coordinator for terrestrial species. I'm looking to use this everywhere. I don't know, recently I've been talking about getting some people that are more regional on board with iMap. I think this would be pretty useful for that. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And then there is one call-in. It might be the phone, it might be the call-in for someone who already gave their intro, but if you're another additional person, feel free to introduce yourself. Call-in ending in 59. Okay, I'm going to assume that was not a new person. Okay, thank you so much. That was really great to hear from all of you and hear about all the different ways you're thinking about using iMap and training people. That's great to hear. So now I'll go into what the process is for becoming a certified trainer. So basically it's 3 steps, and everyone listening here right now can check off the first step. So you have to attend an iMap Certified Trainers Network initial training. So that's what this is. And you have to submit a plan. So we have that on our website, and I'll also send out some links at the end of the webinar, so you don't have to write down a bunch of links right now. You'll just get everything sent to you. But yeah, there's just a quick form. Basically, it's so you tell us who you are and we know you're interested in joining, and maybe you already have a plan for a training, or maybe you have a target audience in mind. But just to get an idea for who you are and that you are intending to become an iMap trainer. And then the third step is basically just to do your first training. And I'll get into it later, the form to fill out for that, just so that we know that happened. So it's basically those 3 steps. So after today, you would just have to submit your certification plan and then conduct your first training. So that's how to join, but then the expectations ongoing are to be the first level, which we call basic trainer. After you do your first training, you are considered a basic trainer, and you just have to do 1 training a year to keep that active. And to be a master trainer, once you do 3 trainings, then you can become a master trainer. And to keep that up, you would have to do at least 2 trainings a year. And being an assistant at a training can count for trainings to keep your certification. But for your initial training, we want you to lead a training. Or you can assist a training first, but for your first initial training that counts and makes you a trainer, we like people to lead 1 training themselves. And then the other thing we expect from certified trainers is to use our forums to keep us up to date on your efforts and help us track the efforts going on statewide. And this information is also available on our website on the training tab. And so that's how to join. And now I'll start to talk about what it looks like to actually conduct an iMap training. And I do see 1 question in the chat, so I'll just address that. Actually, I'll save that for later. But the short answer is that there's a lot of there's flexibility. So you could do a short training. You could break it up into separate parts. You could do 1 part like a flipped classroom where people go through some steps on their own and then come to the training with their questions and whatever problems they ran into. So you don't have to go over all of the training, just the parts that people had issues with. But I'll talk more about that in detail later. So we have a checklist which breaks down the delivery of a training into three main parts: the before, where you prepare, the during, which is when you actually do the presentation, and then afterward, which is when you evaluate. And so I would say most of the work is going to be in the before, so preparing, but we do have materials for you to start with, so the preparing shouldn't be too daunting. If you can keep it simple and use what we have, and it shouldn't be too much prep work, but you will need to do some prep work and practice and everything. And I'm also going to talk about in-person versus webinar. So I'll start with the first step, so preparing. So sort of the long-term planning, so the stuff to do like at least a month ahead of time. That's when you're thinking about what is the training actually going to be. So who are you trying to reach? And that will influence when you do the training. So like if you do the training during the day, then there's certain people you can reach, but if you do it at night, then you would reach other people, for instance, people who are maybe not available during the day because they're at work or school. You would want to think about outdoor versus webinar. If you're doing it in person, do you have internet connection there? Do you want to work with another person to present? Perhaps maybe you need someone with biology expertise to talk about a certain species or something. So there's kind of a lot to think about sort of a month or more ahead of time as you start to solidify your plan. We often recommend having a partner. So that could be that you trade off stuff, like someone presents on a couple species and then you present on the mobile app. But one thing where it really comes into play is while you're presenting on the mobile app, they could go around and see if anyone's having issues and do the one-on-one help. It really makes it a lot easier than if it's just you, then you kind of have to answer all the questions as you go, which can be challenging. And it can kind of make it take a long time. It can kind of get you off track as you're helping individual people. Then we have a training class form where you can let us know that you have a training coming up so we can put it on our website if you want it publicized. We recommend that you set up a pre-registration if possible. Sometimes that doesn't make sense for the type of training you're doing, but in most cases, the pre-registration is super helpful because you want to know ballpark how many people are coming, what sorts of people are coming, are they people you know, or are they new people? Really helpful to see the names of people signing in or registering. For instance, today, when I looked at the registration list, there were some new names. It was less than 20 people. And so that's why I decided to do the go around. In most webinars, I would see that we have maybe 30 people here and I know half of them. And so I wouldn't do the go around. So that sort of stuff is useful to know ahead of time. And then you'll want to think about advertising. So in some cases, you'll want to advertise your training and you think about social media, having us share it, prisms, etc. And that's kind of the ahead of time planning. And then as you get closer to the event, the stuff you want to think about is finalizing and practicing your PowerPoint. And you can start with our template, so you don't have to build it from scratch. Download training documents that you need or print out training documents that you might need. And practice on the app and online. And we found that it's good to send out a reminder email. You can do it the morning of, you can do it a few days before, but it's really good to remind people. And something that can go in there that's really useful is trying to get people started before the training. So for example, it's often useful for trainees to at least create and activate their account and download the mobile app, just so they're kind of ready to learn how to use the mobile app. And inevitably, some people won't do these two steps, even if you ask them to, of course. but it's easier to have a couple people catching up than it is to have everyone waiting for their app to load or waiting for their app to download, for example. And we've found that those two steps are easy enough where most people can get there independently. And some people even go a step farther with this flipped classroom approach. So this is kind of a different strategy where you give people the resources to get through the whole process of recording a test record in iMapInvasives and uploading that, so that you focus the in-person or webinar event on any questions that people had, maybe on species ID, troubleshooting, tips and tricks, that sort of stuff. So that's definitely an approach that you can consider, especially if you have limited time. So that's the main stuff to think about as you're preparing. But some bonus things you could do is think about tailoring it to your specific audience. For example, you could pick locally relevant species to frame the training around. For instance, if you're in an area with a lot of hemlock forest, you might frame your training around a hemlock woolly adelgid and what threats that poses to your particular region. And we often like to pair iMapInvasives trainings with species identification trainings for some small group of species. And usually that group contains a mixture of species. Some of the things we consider are high priority species. One example would be spotted lanternfly. So if you wanted to talk about spotted lanternfly, you would have to think about what life stage is active at the time that you're conducting a training. So if I'm conducting a training right now, I would probably focus more on the egg masses than the adults, because the adults aren't going to be out yet. It's mostly going to be egg masses. And I might also mention the instars, which will emerge somewhat soon. I also have a picture of lesser celandine. That's sort of a classic early spring species. It starts to bloom in April and May. And then I also included a picture of bush honeysuckle. So that's a very common species. It's known in at least most counties in New York State. So it might not be as much of a priority as something new and concerning like spotted lanternfly, but people are much more likely to bump into bush honeysuckle while they're out and about. So that's a really good concrete thing to teach them, and they'll actually find that species and remember that they learned about invasive species and that they can report to iMap. So we've found that pairing those high priority species that they might not find with the common species to be very helpful. And of course, you want to think about the time of year. So like you wouldn't want to tell someone to search for hemlock woolly adelgid in the summer because it's easier to find them in the winter, for example. And you might want to work with someone with a biology background to figure that out. You might also want to think about species that might be underreported in your area. And so that's the preparation. And then so the day of task would be actually doing the presentation. So some things to remember are take attendance in some way. So most importantly, we want like a number of people trained at each training. But you might also want to have a sign-in sheet or keep that spreadsheet that you get from webinar registrations. Remember to silence your phone and close unnecessary programs. I always make sure to cancel out my email so nothing is dinging during my presentation. If you're showing anything online, make sure to have that preloaded before the webinar starts. And make sure to have backup photos even. If you have a partner while you present, they can help in the audience. And at the end of the presentation, you want to make sure to save time for questions and discussion. And you might not have all the answers, and that's totally fine. you have two options. You can direct people to us, so send them to our email, which I'll show at the end, or you can email us and ask their questions and then follow up with them separately if that's what you prefer. And then one thing to also think about is, so after training, people have just learned all of these things. They learned certain species and how to use this app, and they're very engaged. But life will happen and they'll get busy and they might not ever actually go out and report invasive species. So what we want to try to do is try to keep that momentum that they started at the training, and how engaged they are. We want to preserve that as long as we can. So one way to do that is to give people concrete, manageable goals for existence, encouraging everyone to submit their first observation by the end of the week, or to submit 3 observations this month, or to check their local pond for a certain aquatic species that you have trained them on or something. So that's always one thing to consider. And if it's a webinar training, there are a couple additional things to think about. So for instance, what software do you want to use? Do you have that software, or do you need to partner with another organization who has that software? If you have a partner, you'll want to train with them ahead of time for audio, screen sharing, muting, etc. Figure out, we usually like to have everything in one slide deck, and then one person screen shares and advances through the slides through the entire webinar. Some people prefer to switch, so you'll want to figure out what works best for you. And while you can't print out handouts and hand them out, you can email people PDFs before or after the webinar. And also we encourage people to just in general be patient and be prepared. So we usually try to sign on 5 minutes before the start time, but begin the presentation 1 to 2 minutes after the start time, just to make room for people who are having issues to get online. And no matter how prepared you are, technical issues can happen. Like I was saying before, sometimes I'll log into a webinar and my audio just won't work, despite it working for the past 3 months. So things happen no matter how prepared you are. Have backup screenshots. Be ready to help people who might not be familiar with the webinar software you are using. For instance, you might have to tell people where the chat box is. And you might have to do some general troubleshooting with people after the presentation. And so I'll show a quick example of a iMap training. This is from Matt Gallo with the Finger Lakes Prism. It'll just take me a second to pull it up. So this is just an example of a training on the mobile app that you might give. And this slide deck it's been updated a little bit, but it's the slide deck that we can share with you and that you can start from as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Hey, everyone. My name is Matt. Hope you can all hear me okay. If you have any questions, just feel free to shoot them down in the chat box or the Q&A section, below. And so hopefully all of you have already downloaded the iMap Invasive Species app. I'm just going to walk you guys through how to actually set up your account on your app on your phone, and then we're going to take a practice point just so we can all get a little bit more familiar with how to use the app. If you haven't downloaded the app already, you can download it on either the Apple App Store or Google Play. So if you've already done that, feel free to just open that up and you could follow me along as we explore the app together. So there's 3 different steps we're going to go through today. We are going to set up the account on your phone and the app itself. We're then going to record an invasive species sort of practice point. And finally, we're going to upload those records to the actual iMap database. And sort of the way that the iMap team really likes to think about the different steps is they think about it as like a sort of like a sandwich where if you imagine the first step and the third step, you both need connectivity. in order to actually perform those steps, but you don't need any connectivity to record invasive species that you see in the field, which is actually very helpful because often when you're recording invasive species, you're going to be recording them right in areas on the trail or in the woods where you might not have great cell reception. Which I seem to be having, oh, there we go. Okay, so we're going to go through actually setting up the mobile app. So thanks very much. So if you can open up the app on your phone, and when you first go on the app, you should either be met with this preferences screen on the left here, or this sort of green empty screen. If you're on the preferences screen, just stay right there. But if you're seeing this sort of green area, go to the top left here. You'll see these 3 little lines, and then a drop-down menu should pop up, and then just hit preferences. So we're going to go through actually linking the account that you made online to the app itself. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to select the jurisdiction species list to New York, and you are going to enter in the username, which is going to be the email address that you maybe originally set up your account, and the password for your iMap account. Just give you guys a second to enter that in there. And then once you've done so, just hit retrieve IMAP lists. And then if that retrieval was successful, you should see this pop up with a green text saying your IMAP data was retrieved successfully. And this means that you have successfully linked the desktop account to now the mobile app, which means that all the projects and organizations that you might have already joined on the desktop version have now been imported to your mobile app. So you can include those when you're taking your points now. We're going to go through the rest of the preferences here, but for the most part, these are pretty optional. Only change these if you particularly feel the need to. You could change whether you want your species names to pop up as either scientific or common. You could set up a custom species list as well. This is really just for sense of making the app easier to use, because when you go to record an invasive species that you see on the app, you will be met with a list of every invasive species that you can record in the iMap database. So it's hundreds of different species. So if you're only going out, or you're going to have volunteers only going out looking for a few particularly notable species, you can create a customized species list that will then make it so that only the species that you're looking for are going to pop up. So this is just an example of different species that you can use to create a custom species list if you want, right? So you could put Brachmites, fig species, Hemocloidogid, and Oriental bittersweet. Picture quality, you should set that to 100% for the best quality. But pretty much the defaults for everything else in the preferences is fine. It's really up to you if you need to change it or not. If you are going to be taking points with specific organizations or project, you can add them as defaults there, so you don't have to keep listing them over and over again. And of course, once you get through your preferences here, make sure you hit save so that your preferences are actually going to be saved to the app when you're recording your points. And then if you have joined an organization or a project and you're not seeing those pop up as your defaults, or you haven't done it yet, if you're going to join an organization or a project after this training, just make sure that you go back into your preferences and retrieve IMAP lists if you want those organizations and projects that you join after this training to appear on your map. So that was the first step. We're now going to move on to the second step, which is going to be recording an invasive species. This is just going to be a test point for us to just become more comfortable with the experience. So you should be back to the main screen now, and we're going to go to the top right where you should see the Add Observation button. If you could just hit that and follow along with me, we could take a point together. So the first and most important thing to do when you're taking a point is going to be taking a photo with your camera. We're going to be taking a pretend invasive species point here. So you can just take a photo of, the wall or your desk or your laptop, whatever you feel the need to, but just go ahead and follow along and take a picture with your camera if you can. Just give people a few seconds to do that. And then once you have done that, or if you took a picture later on, you could of course upload the photo from the library. But once you have done that, the next thing you're going to do is if you made a custom species list, or you are going to be using a custom species list in the future, it would be key to enable that custom species list right now. And then you're going to select the species that you are observing. We're not observing any actual species, so just select fake species. This should be the very first option in the species list that pops up. It should just say a fake species. Once you've selected that, you're going to put whether you detected or not detected that species. It's up to you. We're just taking a practice point here. Everything else you can pretty much leave as is. You could change the base map view if you'd like. You could zoom in or out of the map showing your location if you'd like. And you can change your coordinates if you feel that your coordinates aren't, if they need to be changed in some sort of way. But for the most part, you can leave these areas as is. If you're taking a point with any sort of project or organization, this is entirely optional. You don't need to be a part of a project or organization to take points with iMap. But if you want them to be listed under a project or organization, you can do that now. You can enter the approximate time you were searching for an invasive species. This is not required as well, but if you feel that that is something that you need to do, or if it's something that you're looking for your volunteers to do, they can enter that in there. And then, of course, if there's any sort of comments that you feel need to be made about the observation that you're making, these can be pretty useful to enhance the quality of your report, right? So if you find a species on private property, or maybe the species you see is in an inaccessible area and you want that to be noted, you can enter those comments in the box below. And then, of course, don't forget to save your changes. Make sure you hit the save button down there. Otherwise, the point you're taking is not going to be saved. And it's important to remember here that good photos really are essential. Blurry pictures like you see on the left there, it makes it really hard for the iMap team to be able to actually verify what you're looking at. So make sure that when you are taking pictures, they're clear, they're focused, they're up close, and really providing a sense of scale can help as well. So you could see in this picture on the right here, you could see not just the hemlock twig that someone is holding, but you can actually see their fingers. So you could get a real physical size of what they're actually looking at. So focus and clarity and scale are really the key points when you're taking a picture. Make sure you're always getting those in there. So those are the first two steps when it comes to setting up the iMap account. We're now going to move on to the last and what I think is the easiest step, and that is going to be actually uploading your records to iMap. So once you have your fake species point, if you go back to the main sort of main screen of the app, that green area should now show a yellow card. That yellow card is the invasive species observation that you just made. And I just like to note here that if at any point you feel that you want to go in and change something in your record after you recorded the point, you can click on that little pencil there, and you could always go in and change the species or the comments you made, or use a different picture or something like that. So don't feel that you're stuck with the record that you made if you entered in something incorrect there. But for what we're going to be doing right now in terms of actually uploading the record, if you could just click on that little gray box, that should check off once you do so. And then we're going to go back up to the top left here where you see those three little lines, and you're going to click Upload Selected. And iMap is going to ask you, are you sure if you're going to upload that record? You are going to hit OK. And then once you do so, that original record card should disappear from your green screen. So once that record card vanishes from your app, that means that the record has left your phone and it is now stored in the iMap online database. If you don't actually upload your records, they won't automatically get sent to the iMap database. They are only updated and uploaded manually. So make sure that, after you're taking your points out on the trail or in the woods or wherever you're taking your points, that when you get back to the office or go back home, that you have a good internet connection and you are then uploading those points so that then the iMap team can take a look at them.
All right, thank you all for sticking through for that. I should mention that I bumped the speed up a little bit just to stay on time, but in real life, Matt's really good at going nice and slow and taking pauses so that people can catch up, and checking in with people to see if they're keeping up, which is very important. So that's just an example of what an iMap training would look like. Some frequently asked questions that we get after these sorts of trainings. I just listed a couple on here. So the first two, those are in our iMap mobile app user guide. So you don't necessarily have to remember them, but people often have an issue with their accounts where they forget to activate it. So one thing to encourage people to do if they are having an issue with the app, they can't retrieve iMap lists or they can't upload, they should make sure they activated their account and they should try to log in online. Because if they can log in online and their username and password are all set, then they should be good to go on the app. but sometimes they need to fix their account or update their password or something. And in that recording, Matt mentioned the issue with the projects and organizations where if you join one, you need to click Retrieve IMAP lists again so that it kind of loads that project into your app so that you can tag your records to it in the app. People will often ask about iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is another place that people report observations. And one recent update to IMAP is that now you can actually view iNaturalist records in iMapInvasives. One tricky thing is that you have to either zoom in or filter because it's too much data to show just all of it. So you need to either be zoomed in or looking at just a couple species to use that layer. We often get people asking about how they know what species to report, like when they take a picture or something. So iMap doesn't have the ability to tell you that within the app. So we encourage people to learn about invasive species in their area and have a list of species that they're looking for. PRISM websites have a lot of good information, and we have some other guides and stuff that are available on the internet, not our guides, guides that other organizations have put out. And we've collected them all onto nyimappinvasives.org/resources. So you can go to that website and get to identification resources from your PRISMs and other organizations. And also iNaturalist has an app called Seek, which can suggest species ID from photos. So you could always use that. And if it's an invasive or something, then you can report it to iMapInvasives. So that's what it looks like to do the training. But then after the training, there's a couple steps as well. So we like to keep track of how many people are trained. So we have a post-training form. That's where you can submit an attendance list or your roster, but that's optional. We also encourage sending out a thank you email to attendees. One thing to include there, you could include our evaluation form. So people can enter in how comfortable they are with iMap, how the training went, that sort of stuff. And you can review your notes and think about what went well, what was challenging, what are some things you might want to change for the next training while it's all fresh in your mind. And so now I'll talk about some goals for 2022. So we surveyed PRISM staff last year. One of the things we figured out was that there's really a couple different branches of the Certified Trainers Network. So there's PRISM staff who are often leading outreach initiatives in their regions and have iMap trainings as a part of their programming. Then there's also other conservation professionals like CCE staff or local preserve staff who also put on iMap trainings. And then we also have volunteers and community scientists who train their communities in iMapInvasives. And the goal is that we want the efforts from these different groups to be complementing one another. So we don't need to be duplicating efforts. The idea is kind of that the PRISMs are leading outreach in their regions and other training initiatives should be aligned with that or filling gaps in that, which is what's happening in the most case and has been incredibly useful. So some of the gaps that PRISM staff mentioned, like that, I was trying to figure out where we should direct our volunteers and community scientists and other members of the CTN. And these were some areas where the PRISM staff suggested and mentioned that they would really appreciate help from certified trainers in these sorts of areas. So there are geographic gaps. So one example would be counties with low population. Those tend to have less volunteers, of course, less data submitted. So trying to reach those counties and get the people there engaged is something that would be really valuable if certified trainers could help with that. There are demographic gaps. So some prisms noted a challenge in reaching youth. So to everyone who in the go around mentioned like high school classes and those sorts of groups, that would be extremely valuable in the eyes of most prisms. Another gap people mention is tech disinclined people, which tend to be older people who might struggle with the technology. So that group sometimes needs extra help to get engaged and get them comfortable using the app. And the prisms also mentioned some organizational gaps, like organizations that they are starting to reach, but maybe not to the extent that they would like, and they want more engagement, like local conservation boards and stuff like that. So if anyone has connections to those sorts of groups in your area, that'd be a good audience to consider when thinking about your iMap trainings. And another thing that came up was an interest in tracking action following trainings. So measuring the success, kind of figuring out what the participation is from our volunteers after we train them up. So thinking about questions like, what extent are trainees actually going out and submitting to iMap? Does conducting a training in an underreported county result in data collection in that area? How do different trainings compare? For instance, is there more participation when you have a webinar versus in person? And so what we are starting to try to do is to use training rosters from trainings to try to assess this. And the goal here is not to track down individual trainees. Like, we're not checking each trainee and seeing if they reported and then emailing them if we didn't. That feels like too much for us. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to kind of get the big picture, like the percent of trainees that are going out and submitting data, and thinking about like maybe for in-person trainings, 50% of people go out and submit records, but for online trainings, only 10%. That's the sort of stuff we would like to glean from this data to help inform our training programs in the future. And this has been mentioned by a couple prisms. We didn't just decide to do this on our own. One thing that it comes from is CRISP, the Catskill prism. They took a first stab at this for 2021 data, trying to look at whether their volunteers were reporting and where they were reporting. And if any, and the way to participate in this is to include your training roster in the post training form. So now I'll wrap it up. So I've mentioned a lot of forms. I just wanted to go through each of them really quickly. So there's the one-time initial certification form that I mentioned, where you basically just tell us who you are and that you are looking to become a certified trainer. So you just have to fill that one time and then you're done. We also have a pre-training form. So that's useful if you want us to put your training on our website, for example. So it lets us know that you're planning a training and gives us the information we need. We have a post-training form, and this is the really important form, which is why it's circled, because that's how we track your efforts. If there's all these trainings going on and they're not recorded anymore, then we don't know they're happening. So it's really important to know where trainings are occurring and how many people are trained and all that sort of stuff. And we also have a training evaluation form, which is optional. So if you want a form to send your trainees after the training, we have a form that you can use where they can put in how well the training went, how comfortable they are with iMap, all that sort of stuff. And as certified trainers, many of you will probably want to become very familiar with iMap and all the advanced features, as well as the features that volunteers use, or whoever you're training. You might be training colleagues or partners. So we have a training page where you can sign up for webinars and events. There are self-guided training materials. There's info on the training network. And we list out a small group of the highest requested help materials. But we also have a link to a full table of all of our resources where you can filter and search for the sorts of stuff you want to learn more about. And so how does the Certified Trainers Network collaborate? So for instance, if someone wants a training, if you're looking for a partner, you need someone with biology expertise, you have questions. We have an email list of certified trainers. So if you need someone to be your training partner for a certain training, or you want a training for a certain group, you can always email me and I can put that request out to our other certified trainers. We do also have a Facebook group, which I'll email you a link to, where people can have those sorts of discussions as well. And we're trying to do meetings for certain trainers. So not something like what we're doing today, which is more of a how-to kind of thing. This would be more of a discussion. It's tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, September 7th. So if you become a certified trainer, you'll be on our list and we'll send you information on this. But we'll talk about how the summer trainings went, highlight successes, brainstorm solutions for challenges, figure out if there's more resources you all need. So the take-home messages are really that the Certified Trainers Network has benefits to New York. So it supports data. It's a way to support data collection and improve our understanding of invasive species distributions. And it also has benefits for individual trainers. So you get to collaborate with this network, and it's good public speaking experience. And to give you some concrete goals, I encourage people to submit an iMapInvasives record, even if it's just a fake species record as a test, and also to fill out the certification plan if you want to become a trainer. And some longer term goals are brainstorming the audiences you might want to reach, setting up your training, and collaborating with fellow trainers. And one thing that I didn't cover that I'll mention quickly, anyone interested in bringing iMap to the classroom, if you go to nyimappinvasives.org/training, there's actually a whole curriculum set up for invasive species. And it could be a whole unit or it could be a one-day thing. There's a lot of flexibility. You can pick and choose what you would want to incorporate into the classroom. So I encourage everyone to keep in touch. I'm sorry I went a little bit over time. I know some of you might have to leave, but I will stay on for a few minutes for some discussion if anyone's interested. But feel free to reach out to us. And thank you all for joining us today, and thank you in advance for any trainings that you conduct. We really appreciate the help in getting the word out and getting more iMap users out there looking for invasive species and reporting them. So thank you all. And at the beginning, I asked, there are some experienced trainers in the audience today. If any of you have thought of one tip that you might have for new trainers, I'd love to hear that. So feel free, any of you experienced trainers, to unmute and give some of your tips.
I'll add a couple of things. That was really great. The first is to add on to your last point that how amazing the Certified Trainers Network is. We should have had the numbers with us, but last year, you know, they gave an incredible number of trainings to an incredible number of people. So it really is quite valuable. A couple things I thought of for that flipped training, if people choose to go that way, we do have that series of 4 videos that outline that flipped, maybe you could include that in the email you send.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I do like to re-emphasize, one of the things about the invasives world is the ability to report not detected. And that is one of the things you can do on the iMap mobile app. And I know in some species that's been very, very helpful data. If you're interested in what species are common and possibly underreported or what are new to your area, the species tier list table, which you can also get to from our website, is very helpful. Another thing for in-person trainings, which, I haven't done an in-person training in 2 years personally, but one method that has worked very well in the past is if you do that flip the classroom, then when you get to the meeting, and you can even encourage anyone who had trouble to come early, often someone who successfully did those 4 steps, created an account online, downloaded the app, submitted a fake species, they can often help someone else who had trouble. And that just, what's that called? It multiplies your ability to help people at once. So that's worked out quite well. If you're doing a webinar, we do have a cheat sheet for people you can send to people ahead of time who aren't used to a webinar, and it shows, this is where chat is, this is where mute is. That can be helpful. If you do the flip training, then sometimes you can have time to do a little bit about iMap mobile, iMap online in a training. And one of the things people really like are the email alerts. So that's something to consider, and we have slides and stuff for that if that interests you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Meg. Do any of our experienced trainers have any tips?
I
Hi, this is
think
Brittany
between
Herman.
you and Meg, you've covered pretty much everything. It's a great job.
Thank you. And I think I heard someone else. I didn't see who.
Yeah. Hi, this is Brittany Hernan. Something that worked for us is we kind of, instead of doing like the flipped classroom, we did our training virtually on one weekend, and then the following weekend we met in the field. And so I was able to do a little like screen recording of a hemlock woolly delgid presence, a not detected, a healthy hemlock tree. And we went over exactly like, the screen recording of how to, go to iMap and where to click to make the account. And we didn't have a huge turnout because it was like a low temperature warning. It was very cold that day. But everyone that showed up to our training in the field had the iMap app already set up on their phone. So that worked really well for us this year.
Yeah, that's cool. Usually there's at least someone who didn't download it, but that's a good idea that the iMap stuff can be done virtually, and then the out in the field species identification, that can be done in person. Cool, thank you. And anyone else can also feel free to chime in any ideas or any questions they have. I'll leave it open to anyone else, and anyone who has to sign off. Have a great day, and thank you for joining. Stop the recording now.